Hi guys! I am going to make a quilted coat today, and I have this is a sweater that I deconstructed to make the pattern. I have my quilt over here, and my sewing tables are behind me. We'll get to that in a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trace my pattern pieces onto some old wrapping paper so that I can have a pattern that I can save that's not just pieces of fabric. So we'll go ahead and do that. You must remove any dogs from your pattern pieces before proceeding. If they'll let you. Get up.
Now, when I'm tracing my pattern pieces, I don't necessarily outline every lump and bump, especially on stretchy fabric like this. I try to make the line straight and about as ideal as possible. And if you have a paper that is not in a roll, your life will be a lot easier for this, or just use paper weights instead of your feet.
There's a couple of things that I love about making clothes out of quilts. First is that they're already lined, and with a quilt this big, you have enough trim space that you don't have to actually trim anything yourself, so it'll already have really nice edges. You just have to line up your pattern pieces so that those border pieces are on your trim. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. And then third, it doesn't matter which way your pieces are facing, because these are squares, of course, and they're all in different directions. So it doesn't matter if our first front piece is laid out top to bottom and our second is side to side, because it's the same. You can see here that my pattern would want me to cut in here. I think I'm just gonna keep that straight. So I'm gonna do nothing to these two sides. And then I'm going to come in, up, la-da-da.
And I'm adding a 1/2 inch seam allowance here as well. Now for the opposite side front panel, I use the opposite side of the quilt so that I could have that trim on the front and bottom edge. And here I'm laying my piece that I just cut out on top to to make sure that I'm combining my pattern as well as the piece that I've already cut, because I don't want these two front pieces to be dramatically different. Because I did change my shape a little bit by making that front edge straight, I want to make sure those two pieces match. And then similarly here, because I changed those shapes, I want to make sure everything's matching up when I'm going to stitch together my back and front pieces. Now, unfortunately, you'll see in a little while I had to redo my sleeves again after this. I'm thinking because the sweater was a more stretchy material, they were able to be narrower. Because my quilt does not have much give, I needed wider sleeves, but you'll see that in just a few minutes. And then I laid out my pattern pieces to get a visual of what the full product's gonna look like. And then I moved to my sewing machine. I'm starting with constructing my body. So I'm taking my first front panel and I'm pinning it to my back panel along the sides and then along the shoulders. And then I sew these two together. I used a zigzag stitch all over this coat just to be safe because it's super thick. And then I pin and sew on my second front panel to the other side. And now I have a little quilt vest. But of course, this is not my final product, so next I have to add on the sleeves. I'm just pinning the right side of my sleeve to the right side of my body. And since this is a circle, I do half of this and then I take it down off the mannequin and do the second half in my lap because it's just easier. Then I sew around the entire armhole.
Sleeve is attached.
And then I seam together the sides of my sleeves, right sides facing in. And then I realize the sleeve is too small.
I'm afraid I might have to make all new sleeves. Okay, so when we left off, I had discovered that my sleeves were going to be too narrow. And I tried some things. I tried slitting up the sleeve a bit and making it a cuff, but it made it better, but it's still tight. See, when I try to bend the arm, it's not great. And I really want it to be perfect, so I'm gonna redo the sleeves and make them wider. So I'm just going to unpick my sleeve from my jacket. I only have one attached, so it should be easy, and then recut my sleeves.
And of course I kept this fabric. This is what I ended up cutting my pockets out of.
So you can see how we go from the armpit and then at a diagonal in toward the cuff. And I want my armpit width to be the same because that's fitting perfectly into my armhole on the jacket. Am I recording? Yes. Okay. So I'm just gonna bring this out a little bit, and then I'm gonna do less of a dramatic decrease down the arm side.
And I'm just drawing this rough line with chalk, making both sides match up evenly. Then I cut the sleeve out, making sure I add my 1/2 inch seam allowance to the top part. And then I'm pinning it together so I can do a test fit.
Much better.
And now time for my second sleeve. Again, like I did with my front 2 pieces, I'm using my first cut sleeve as kind of a guide so that they match. Don't want one sleeve bigger than the other. And then I'm attaching the first sleeve onto the body once again. Same process as before, sewing the sleeve onto the armhole. And then pinning the bottom of the sleeve together and seaming up that bottom. And I left about 2 inches open on the end so I could make a cuff. Then finally, because of the way I attached these pieces with the armhole first and then sewing down the bottom, I have a little gap under the armpit, so I'm just sewing that up. And I did a test fit here and it was great, so I'm moving on to the second sleeve. Yay, it's a coat!
So now I'm just sewing the accent edge around my collar, and I did this by taking one of my scraps of my quilt fabric and just removing the backing, and then I folded and pressed that to length, and now I'm sewing it around my collar.
This actually didn't go great, and I think I'm going to redo it at some point because I'm sewing a straight piece of fabric onto a curved neckline. So there were some bumps and some spots where I didn't catch both sides of the trim, which bugs the crap out of me, but it's fine for now. And then I moved on to sewing my sleeve cuffs. I just did a rolled hem on the sleeves and left just half an inch open for cuffing if I want to do that later. And the last feature to make is the pocket, and like I said, I used my previous sleeves that were too small to make my pockets. So I did a couple test fits with the quilt material and it was just too thick to sew through and have my rolled hem like I wanted. So I took out the batting of the quilt and just used the front and the backing to make my pockets. It's much thinner and worked perfectly. So the first thing to sew is the top part of the pocket. Again, like I said, I just did a rolled hem here with a zigzag stitch. And then I pinned that pocket onto my coat, getting it in just the right spot, folding under my sides and my bottom so it makes a pocket. And then I sew the pocket onto the coat, starting with the bottom so that I get the corners as part of that first pass. So I sew along the bottom, then up the left, pick up my foot, and sew down the right. And then it's just the same exact thing for the second pocket.
I'm just gonna reinforce some of these little spots that need it. And that's it. I'll be done.
It turned out even better than I expected. Of course, it's summer right now, but this coat is going to be super warm in the winter, and I can't wait to wear it. Thanks for watching. Tune in next time.